One morning, the train station was quieter than usual. The sun had just begun to rise, painting soft golden streaks across the metal rails. Steam hissed from a passing engine, and pigeons fluttered near the benches, searching for crumbs left by early travelers. Amid the slow hum of footsteps and rolling suitcases, a little girl sat alone on the cold concrete floor near platform 6. Her clothes were faded, her hair tangled, and beside her was a small cardboard sign, written in shaky letters. "I don't need a ticket. Just food." People walked past her as if she were invisible. Some glanced for a second, then turned their heads away, pretending they didn't see. Others just kept talking on their phones, their eyes fixed ahead. The girl's hands were clasped around her knees, trying to stay warm in the chilly morning air. Her stomach rumbled, but she didn't move. She had already learned that begging didn't always bring kindness. Sometimes it brought anger. Across the platform, the smell of fresh coffee filled the air as a man in a dark suit stepped out of a black car. He was tall, sharp, and confident. The kind of man who looked like he always knew where he was going. His name was Ethan Cole, CEO of one of the biggest tech companies in New York. To the world, he was a self-made millionaire, a man who built an empire from nothing. But inside, he carried a silence money could never fill. He had just come back from a long business trip, and was on his way to another meeting, too busy to notice anything around him. Until he saw the girl. Ethan paused for a moment. He didn't know why his eyes stopped on her, but something about that sign tugged at him. "I don't need a ticket, just food." The simplicity of it, the quiet honesty, made his chest tighten. He had seen people beg before, but not like this. This wasn't desperation for money, it was hunger for survival. He glanced at his watch. He was running late. His driver waited near the car, holding the door open. But Ethan didn't move. Instead he walked toward the little girl slowly. She looked up when she heard footsteps, her eyes wide, unsure whether to hope or hide. "Hey," Ethan said softly, stopping a few feet away. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Lily," she whispered. "Lily," he repeated, as if testing how it felt to say something gentle. "Where are your parents?" She looked down. "They're gone." The words hit him harder than he expected. Gone. Such a small word for something that could break a life. He crouched beside her, noticing how thin her fingers were. How tightly she held that small sign as if it was her only shield. "When's the last time you ate, Lily?" he asked. She blinked. "Yesterday morning. I think." Ethan looked around. The crowd moved like a river, busy and unaware. Nobody stopped, nobody cared. He sighed quietly. Then reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. But before he could hand her any cash, Lily shook her head. "I don't want money," she said quickly. "I just want food, please." Her voice trembled, and that single word "please" cracked something open inside him. He had spent years building towers of success, signing deals, attending galas, but right now, standing before a hungry child, all that felt empty. "Okay," he said, "come with me." Lily's eyes widened again. "Really?" "Yes, really. I know a cafe nearby. We'll get you something to eat." She stood slowly, clutching her small backpack. It looked too light to hold anything useful. Ethan noticed how she kept glancing around, as if afraid someone might tell her to sit back down. He gave her a reassuring nod. "It's all right. You're safe." They walked together through the station. The morning crowd began to thicken, trains whistling in the distance. As they reached the exit, Ethan's driver gave him a confused look but said nothing. They crossed the street to a small corner cafe where the smell of pancakes and syrup filled the air. Inside, warmth wrapped around them. The waitress looked surprised when she saw the little girl, but Ethan spoke before she could ask questions. "A hot meal for her, please. Anything she wants." Lily stared at the menu like it was something sacred. "Can I have pancakes? With strawberries?" "Of course," Ethan said, smiling for the first time in days. As she ate, he sat quietly across from her watching. She didn't speak much, but the way she held each bite, the way her eyes softened with relief, it said more than words could. For a few minutes, the noise of the world faded. It was just a man and a little girl who hadn't eaten in too long, sharing a simple breakfast that felt bigger than anything Ethan had bought in years. When she finished, she looked up shyly. "Thank you, sir." "You don't need to thank me," he replied gently. Where will you go now? She hesitated. I don't know. I was hoping to find my aunt in the city. But I don't have her address anymore. Ethan leaned back, his mind turning. There was something about this girl. Something fragile yet brave. He knew he couldn't just leave her at the station again. All right, Lily, he said after a pause. Let's figure this out together. She tilted her head. You mean you'll help me?
Wes?
Ethan said softly. We'll find your aunt. I promise. Outside, the morning sun had risen fully, flooding the street with light. For the first time in a long while. Ethan felt like he was walking toward something real. Not another deal or contract, but something that might heal a part of him he didn't even know was broken. And as they stepped out of the cafe, Lily smiled for the first time. It was small and quiet. But to Ethan, it felt like hope. Tuku, the morning breeze carried the scent of fresh coffee and asphalt as they stepped out of the cafe. Ethan walked beside Lily, his mind unusually quiet. She held her small backpack close, her eyes wandering across the tall buildings like she was trying to remember where she belonged. So? He asked gently. Do you remember where your aunt might live? Lily thought for a moment. She had a flower shop, near a big park. There was a fountain. And pigeons always came when we threw crumbs. Ethan nodded slowly. That sounds like Central Park. He turned to his driver Michael. Check if there's a flower shop near Central Park. Michael began typing on his phone. The car rolled forward through the crowded streets. Sunlight flashing across the windshield. Lily leaned her face against the window, watching people rush past, suits, coffee cups, ladders she didn't understand. It had been days since anyone had looked at her like she mattered. Ethan glanced at her reflection in the glass. She was small, quiet, and far too young to carry that kind of sadness. Something deep in him stirred. Something that success had buried long ago. Sir, Michael said after a moment. There's a shop called Clara's Blossoms. Been there for years. Ethan turned to Lily. Does that name sound familiar? Her eyes lit up instantly. Yes! That's her.
Aunt Clara.
Ethan smiled. Then let's go find her. The city changed as they approached Central Park. The noise softened, replaced by the hum of trees and the sound of birds. The car stopped in front of a small, cheerful shop with pink flowers painted on its windows. The sign read Clara's Blossoms. Lily's breath caught. Before Ethan could say anything, she opened the door and ran toward the shop. The small bell above the entrance rang as she pushed it open. Inside, a woman stood behind the counter arranging flowers in glass vases. She turned, startled, when she heard the bell, and then froze. Her hands trembled. The vase slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. Lily, she whispered. Lily's eyes filled with tears. Aunt Clara. The woman dropped to her knees, pulling the girl into her arms. They clung to each other as if afraid the world might take them apart again. Clara kissed her forehead over and over. Oh, my baby, I thought you were gone. Where's your mother? Lily's face fell. She didn't wake up. I waited, but she didn't. Clara's breath hitched. Her arms tightened around the child, tears spilling freely now. Ethan stepped back quietly, giving them space. The scene hit him harder than he expected. The pain, the love, the relief. After a few minutes, Clara stood and wiped her eyes, still holding Lily's hand. You found her? She asked Ethan. He nodded. She was sitting at the station with a sign. She didn't ask for money, only food. But Clara's eyes softened with gratitude. Thank you, sir. You brought her home. Ethan smiled faintly. I just stopped. She did the rest. Clara guided Lily to a small wooden chair near the counter. Sit, sweetheart. I'll make you something warm. Then she turned back to Ethan. Can I offer you coffee? Please. You've done more than you know. He nodded politely and sat near the window. The shop smelled of roses and lavender, soft music playing in the background. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something gentle settling inside him. The kind of peace he'd forgotten existed. Lily soon returned with a mug of cocoa in her hands, her cheeks flushed again. Aunt Clara says I can stay here. She said, her voice brighter now. She said I'll help her water the flowers. That sounds perfect, Ethan said. You'll make a great helper. She smiled shyly. Will I see you again? Ethan hesitated. The question caught him off guard. He'd meant to help and move on. That was all. But now, looking at her small hopeful eyes, walking away didn't feel right. Yeah, he said quietly. You'll see me again. When he left the flower shop, the city looked different. The same streets, same rush, but it felt warmer somehow. As his car pulled away, he glanced once more at the window. Lily was waving through the glass, her face glowing with something close to joy. Ethan leaned back in his seat and exhaled. He didn't know why this small encounter mattered so much. But somewhere deep down, he knew he wasn't done with this story yet. Something inside him had shifted. Back in the shop, Clara brushed Lily's hair and whispered, "You're safe now, sweetheart." But as she looked toward the door, her thoughts lingered on the man who had brought her niece home. And outside, as the city swallowed the sound of the traffic, Ethan Cole, the millionaire who had stopped for a hungry girl, found himself thinking not about profits or meetings, but about a sign made of cardboard that read, "I don't need a ticket, just food." That small message had changed his morning. He didn't know yet, but it was about to change his entire life. 2. The next morning, sunlight poured through the windows of Clara's flower shop. The scent of roses, tulips, and fresh soil filled the air. Lily was already awake, sitting behind the counter with a little watering can in her hands. She moved from pot to pot carefully, humming softly. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe. Clara watched her from across the room, her eyes full of both love and sadness. She still couldn't believe Lily was here. Every night since her sister's death, she had prayed for a miracle, and somehow, one had found its way to her door. The bell above the door rang. Clara turned, expecting a customer, but paused when she saw who it was. Ethan stood there, holding a brown paper bag. He smiled slightly. "I brought breakfast." Lily's face lit up. "You came back." He nodded. "I promised, didn't I?" Clara smiled faintly. "You didn't have to, Mr. Cole." "Ethan," he corrected softly. "And I wanted to." They sat around the small table in the corner, the morning sunlight warming their faces. Ethan unpacked sandwiches and coffee, placing a small chocolate donut in front of Lily. Her eyes widened as if it were treasure. As they ate, Clara told him about her sister. How she had fallen sick months ago. How they had lost contact when she moved to another city looking for work. "I kept sending letters," Clara said quietly, "but none came back. I thought she didn't want help." Ethan listened in silence, his fingers wrapped around the coffee cup. When he looked at Lily, sitting there with her bright eyes and chocolate-stained smile, something tugged at him. This little girl had lost everything, and yet she smiled. When breakfast was over, Ethan stood. "I should get going," he said softly. "There's a meeting waiting for me." Lily's face fell. "Will you come again?" He smiled. "If your aunt doesn't mind." Clara laughed softly. "You're welcome anytime. You've already done more for us than we can repay." Ethan nodded and left. But as he stepped into the busy street, the noise of the world felt emptier than before. Meetings, reports, numbers. They suddenly seemed meaningless compared to that little flower shop. Later that day, Ethan sat in his office, surrounded by glass walls overlooking the city. His assistant spoke, but his mind was elsewhere. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lily's small hands watering flowers. He saw the sign she'd held. He heard her quiet voice saying, "Please, just food." That night, after work, Ethan found himself driving back to the flower shop without planning to. When he arrived, the lights were still on. Through the window, he saw Clara closing up while Lily arranged daisies into small bundles. He smiled and walked in. Clara looked up in surprise. "Ethan, you're back." "I was nearby," he said simply. "Thought I'd stop by." Lily ran up to him. "Look. I made a flower crown." She held it out proudly. He bent down so she could place it on his head. She giggled. "Now you look like a flower king." Clara laughed, shaking her head. "She's been happier in one day than she's been in months." Ethan smiled faintly. "She reminds me what happiness actually looks like." They talked for a while as Lily finished her little bouquet. When it was time to close, Ethan helped Clara stack boxes near the counter. She hesitated for a moment before asking, "Why are you doing all this? You don't even know us." He paused. "Because I know what it's like to be alone," he said quietly. "And because she deserves better than what life has given her." The Clara nodded slowly. There was something honest in his voice, something heavy with truth. Thank you, Ethan, she said. For caring when you didn't have to. The next few days passed quickly. Ethan stopped by often. Sometimes with lunch, sometimes just to talk. Lily started waiting for him by the window every afternoon, running to the door the moment his car appeared. She told him stories about her mom. About how she used to braid her hair and sing to her when it rained. Ethan listened to every word. One evening, after closing, Lily handed him a small paper bag. I made this for you, she said shyly. Inside was a tiny clay heart painted unevenly in red. On the back, in crooked letters, it read, "Thank you for seeing me." Ethan stared at it for a long moment. His throat tightened. It's perfect, he said softly. When he got home that night, he placed the little heart on his desk beside his company awards. Somehow it looked more valuable than all of them. The next morning, Ethan called Clara. I want to help, he said. Not out of charity, but because I can. Clara hesitated. Help how? He smiled. Let's expand your flower shop. You have something special here, peace, kindness, warmth. The city needs more of that. But she was speechless. Ethan, that's too much. It's not. He interrupted gently. Think of it as an investment in good things. By the end of the week, Ethan had arranged everything. A small renovation, better supplies, new shelves, and even a little bench outside where Lily could sit and greet people. When it was done, Clara's blossoms looked brighter than ever. On the day they reopened, the shop was filled with laughter and petals. Neighbors came by, drawn by the colors and scents. Lily handed out tiny bouquets, her smile brighter than any flower in the room. Ethan stood near the door watching. Clara came beside him, her voice soft. You changed everything for us. He shook his head. No, she changed everything for me. The Clara smiled. You've given her a second chance. And maybe yourself one too. Ethan looked toward Lily, who was talking to a customer, her face full of light. For the first time in years, he felt something real, not success, not power, but purpose. As the sun began to set, Lily ran to him, holding a daisy. This one's for you, she said. He took it carefully. Thank you, Lily, she grinned. Now you can't forget us. Ethan smiled, placing the daisy in his coat pocket. I won't. Outside, the evening air carried the faint smell of flowers through the street. And in that small corner of the city, a man who had once been too busy to stop finally learned what it meant to slow down. And to care. It had started with a sign that said, I don't need a ticket. Just food. But it ended with something far greater. A reminder that sometimes, the smallest moments change everything. 2 days turned into weeks, and life at Clara's Blossoms began to bloom again. The shop was busier than ever. Bright flowers filled every corner, laughter filled the air, and Lily became the heart of the place. She'd stand by the window each morning, arranging small bouquets with ribbons and smiling at passers-by. The neighborhood had grown fond of her. People often stopped to say hello, sometimes just to see her smile. Ethan visited almost every day. Sometimes he brought new seeds or flower pots for the shop. Other times, he'd sit with Clara over coffee while Lily hummed in the background. He never said it out loud. But he had grown attached to that quiet little world. The scent of flowers, the warmth of laughter, the feeling of being needed. One morning, Ethan arrived earlier than usual. He found Lily sitting on the floor near the back of the shop, a stack of old papers scattered around her. She looked up when she saw him and smiled. Ethan, look what I found. He knelt beside her. What is it? They're letters, she said. My mom wrote them. I think she was trying to send them to Aunt Clara. Clara walked over, wiping her hands on her apron. I didn't even know she wrote these, she whispered, kneeling down beside them. She picked up one of the envelopes. Yellowed, the ink faded but still readable. Her eyes began to fill as she read aloud. Dear Clara, I hope this letter finds you well. Things are hard, but Lily is strong. She keeps me smiling even when I feel like breaking. I promise I'll come home soon once I get back on my feet. Tell her Aunt Clara loves her, okay? Clara's voice broke. She pressed the letter to her chest. Lily's small hand reached for hers. Ethan stayed quiet, his gaze soft. She tried. Clara whispered. She wanted to come back. Lily leaned closer. She told me about you, Aunt Clara. She said you were kind like sunshine, Clara smiled through her tears. She was right. You both were my sunshine. Ethan looked at the stack of letters and thought about how fragile life was. How easily people got lost between distance, pride, and time. He picked one up gently. She must have kept writing even when she couldn't send them. Lily nodded. She said words can keep love alive. The words lingered in the air. Clara placed the letters in a small box, and set it on the shelf behind the counter. These will stay here, she said softly. This shop will always carry her love. That afternoon, Ethan stayed longer than usual. The shop was quiet. The smell of lavender drifted through the air. Lily was drawing something at the counter. When she finished, she handed the paper to him. It's you and me and Aunt Clara, she said proudly. And our shop. Ethan looked at the picture. 3 smiling figures standing among bright flowers. His throat tightened. That's beautiful, Lily. She grinned. You should hang it in your office so you don't forget us. He nodded. I will. That night, Ethan placed the drawing beside the little clay heart on his desk. He stared at them for a long time, longer than he'd meant to. His assistant had once joked that he never kept personal things in his office. It was too clean, too perfect. But now, for the first time, the space felt alive. The next morning, Ethan received a message from Clara. Can you stop by the shop later? I want to talk about something important. He arrived that afternoon. His usual calm expression hiding quiet curiosity. Clara met him with a serious look. Ethan, there's something I've been thinking about, she said. Lily needs to go back to school. He nodded. Of course she does. I've been looking into it, but it's expensive. Clara continued. And the waiting list for public schools nearby is long. She hesitated. I don't want to ask. You don't have to. Ethan interrupted softly. I'll take care of it. She blinked. Ethan. He shook his head. No arguments. She deserves the best. Clara looked at him for a long moment. There was gratitude in her eyes, but also something deeper. Respect. You're not just helping her, you know. You're helping me remember that kindness still exists. He smiled faintly. It's her doing, not mine. That evening, they filled out forms together while Lily sat at the counter, swinging her legs and humming. The papers were approved faster than expected, and within days, Lily was enrolled in a small private school just a few blocks away. The first morning she wore her new uniform. She looked at herself in the mirror and giggled. Do I look smart? She asked. The smartest, Ethan said, straightening her collar. Clara watched from the doorway, tears in her eyes again. You look like your mom, she whispered. When Ethan drove her to school, Lily's excitement was contagious. She pressed her face against the window, pointing at every dog, bus, and ice cream cart they passed. When they reached the gate, she paused and looked up at him. Ethan. Yes, Lily. Thank you for not walking past me that day. He froze. For a second, the noise of the city disappeared. You don't have to thank me, he said quietly. You changed more than you know. She smiled and ran toward the building, her backpack bouncing with every step. Ethan stood there, watching her disappear into the crowd of children. Something inside him felt new, lighter, freer. Back at the shop, Clara handed him a small envelope. This came for you, she said. He frowned. For me? Yes. It was in the mail this morning. He opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note. Dear Ethan, I don't know what brought you to that station, but I believe God does everything for a reason. You gave my Lily a future. Maybe you were meant to find her. Maybe she was meant to remind you that even the strongest hearts need softness too. Clara, Ethan folded the note slowly, his eyes distant. She's right, he murmured. From that day on, Ethan became a part of their small family. He wasn't just the man who owned tall buildings anymore. He was the man who helped water flowers on Sundays, who showed up for school meetings, who sometimes stayed late to fix broken shelves. One night, as they closed the shop, Lily looked up at the stars and said, Mom used to tell me the stars are people we miss. They shine so we don't feel alone. Ethan looked up too. Then she's shining very bright tonight. Lily smiled, taking his hand. She's happy you stopped for me. He nodded slowly, his voice almost a whisper. I'm happy I did too. In that quiet corner of the city, among petals and laughter, 3 lives had found new meaning. All because one morning, a little girl sat at a train station with a sign that said I don't need a ticket, just food. And someone, finally, decided to stop. The next morning. The sky was pale and soft, painted in gray and gold. Ethan parked his car near the same train station where it had all started. The world around him was rushing. People with coffee cups, briefcases, and tired eyes. But for him, time seemed to move slower there. He stood quietly for a moment, watching the benches where a small girl once sat, clutching a cardboard sign that read, I don't need a ticket. Just food. He walked closer to the spot, his shoes brushing against the cold pavement. It had been months, but the memory was still clear as daylight. The hunger in Lily's eyes, the trembling in her voice. The way her tiny hands held that sign like it was her last hope. That single moment had changed everything. It turned a wealthy, lonely CEO into something he had never imagined. A father. Ethan smiled faintly and sat down on the same bench. He placed a cup of hot chocolate beside him. A quiet tribute to the first drink he ever gave her. The sound of a train arriving filled the air, and for a second, he closed his eyes and just listened. Life had a strange way of circling back, always to the place where it all began. Back then, he had everything money could buy, yet nothing that truly mattered. Now, with Lily in his life, every morning felt new, every laugh felt like a gift. The silence that once haunted his mansion, had turned into laughter echoing through its halls. Later that afternoon, Ethan picked Lily up from school. She came running toward him, her hair flying behind her and her backpack swinging. Daddy! She called out, her voice bright and full of joy. He knelt down as she jumped into his arms, holding her tight. How was your day, sweetheart? He asked with a warm smile. We learned about kindness, she said proudly. Teacher said, when you help someone, it makes a circle, and that circle comes back to you. Ethan chuckled softly. She's right, Lily. That's exactly how the world works. As she tilted her head. Curious. Is that why you helped me that day at the station? He paused, the moment wrapping around him like a whisper. Yes, he said softly. And because you helped me too. Lily blinked. I helped you. He smiled. More than you'll ever know. On the way home, she sang quietly in the back seat, making up songs about clouds and dreams. Ethan glanced at her in the mirror. The same little girl whose life had crossed his path when he least expected it. She was growing fast, brighter every day, carrying with her the spark of hope that had reignited his own heart. When they reached home, Lily ran straight to the porch, holding up a drawing she made at school.
Daddy, look! I drew us!
He took the picture gently. It showed a man giving food to a little girl at a train station, both smiling. At the top, in colorful letters, she had written, "Kindness is the best ticket." Ethan's eyes softened, his throat tightening. That's beautiful. Lily, can we hang it here? She asked eagerly, pointing near the front door. He nodded. Of course. Let's make it the first thing everyone sees. They taped it beside the entrance, the colors glowing under the evening light. For a long moment, Ethan just stood there, watching her small hands press the tape firmly against the wall. It wasn't just a drawing. It was their story, captured in a child's heart. Later that night, as the house grew quiet and Lily drifted to sleep, Ethan sat in his study. On the wall behind him hung the framed cardboard sign she once held. He stared at it, remembering the cold day, the rain, her shivering body, and her courage to ask for help. That simple act had changed 2 lives forever. He picked up a pen and wrote a few words on a notepad. The greatest wealth is not found in what you own, but in who you choose to care for. As he set the pen down, a gentle knock came on the door. It was Mrs. Clark, their kind neighbor who often watched Lily when he worked late. She smiled warmly and handed him a small box. Lily asked me to give this to you, she said softly. She said it's for Father's Day. Ethan opened the box carefully. Inside was a handmade card decorated with glitter and uneven hearts. In bright crayon letters, it read, "To the man who stopped when no one else did. You gave me food. But more than that, you gave me love. I love you, Daddy." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He pressed the card to his chest and whispered, "I love you too. My little miracle." He looked toward the window, the stars glowing faintly above. Somewhere out there, life was still rushing. People were still busy chasing things that never lasted. But for Ethan, the only thing that truly mattered was asleep in the next room. A child who taught him that love begins when you stop to listen. When you care enough to see. He stood up, walked quietly to her room, and watched her sleeping peacefully, clutching her small teddy bear. He brushed a strand of hair from her face and whispered, "Thank you for saving me." As he turned off the light, he smiled. The station, the sign, the cold morning, all of it led him here. And he wouldn't change a single thing. Because sometimes, the smallest act of kindness becomes the greatest story of your life. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in kindness. Leave a comment below and tell us what kindness means to you. And thank you so much for giving your precious time to this story. Your support keeps stories like this alive.